Today's passage will be on Matthew 25, verses 14 to 30. For it will be like a man going on a journey, who called his servants and entrusted to them his property. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, to each according to his ability. Then he went away. He who had received the 5 talents went at once and traded with them, and he made 5 talents more. So also he who had the 2 talents made 2 talents more. But he who had received the 1 talent went and dug in the ground and hid his master's money. Now after a long time the master of those servants came and settled accounts with them. And he who had received the 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 talents more, saying, Master, you delivered to me 5 talents. Here, I have made 5 talents more. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. And he also who had the 2 talents came forward, saying, Master, you delivered to me 2 talents. Here, I have made 2 talents more. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. He also who had received the 1 talent came forward, saying, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow, and gathering where you scattered no seed. So I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here, you have what is yours. But his master answered him, You wicked and slothful servant. You knew that I reap where I have not sown, and gather where I scattered no seed. Then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers, and at my coming I should have received what was my own with interest. So take the talent from him, and give it to him who has the 10 talents. For to everyone who has will more be given, and he will have an abundance. But from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. And cast the worthless servant into the outer darkness, in that place where will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Amen. You may be seated.
Good morning. This time when I had a privilege of visiting 3 SRB small groups. I really enjoyed. I enjoyed food and laughter, and I was so encouraged about God's people as you, particularly those 3 SRB groups that I visited. Yes, at times being goofy and just joke around, that's a part of the fun. And I really enjoyed that part of fellowship. And I'm sure I'll be enjoying more, Lord willing, after I come permanently, hope, after January. As I prepared this message, I ran into this one of the YouTube clips that says, the richest place on earth is cemetery. And it talks about ideas, dreams, and abilities, talents, gifts are given to you, but for whatever reason, you never acted on those ideas, you never pursued that dream, you never used your voice, you never saw your leadership, you never wrote that book, you never used your talent. Ideas, dreams, abilities, talents, and gifts are buried with you, and therefore the richest place on earth would be cemetery. And one of my greatest fears is actually burying what God has given me, and therefore not using it for its full impact, and just bury it and face the giver of my gifts. That's my honest fear. Today we read this parable of talents. Most of you are familiar with this passage, probably read through that more than once, several times. I mean, you know the story, most of you. There are 3 servants who were given 1 to 5 talents. And the one who was given 5 talents worked, used it, and then increased another 5. Those who were given 2 used it, and then increased another 2. But the one did something else that's very radically different from the other 2. This parable of talents is also called a parable of judgment. And that's a really scary thought. hardly talk about judgment because we are uncomfortable. I don't want to go through this passage in terms of judgment, but rather just go through parable talents without mentioning that. But it's there for that particular servant who was given 1 talent and did something else. It is a parable about maximizing opportunities, not wasting them. It is also called a parable of judgment, as I mentioned. The parable is left to readers, to you and me, to discern what those gifts and opportunities are. So I'm not going to mention that how to find gifts and opportunities that God has given us. Rather, I'm going to focus on other things. There are 3 main background principles before I actually go into the main point today. So let's look at 3 background principles before we go into the main point. The first one is talents, gifts, and privileges are given by the master. Simple, quite straightforward. Should we, going back to the basic, the theme that we are going through in our church, the master has entrusted them with the servants. It is a matter of stewardship. Realizing that every good and perfect gift comes from God makes us humble because we are given temporarily to do something. God is the source of treasure, time, and talent. We are here to steward those God-given resources. And God has not given us the gifts and talents to keep them, but to use them for His kingdom. That's first. And it's only background information, principle. Second, the talent is given each, quote, according to his or her ability. It doesn't matter how much or how big the talent is. It matters what you do with it. Commentators try to come up with a dollar figure, the actual dollar amount, as to what the actual talent would be worth in today's term. A talent was equivalent to approximately, they say, 6,000 denarii. I don't know what the denarii is, other than reading from the commentary, but that is, the 6,000 denarii is equivalent to 20 years of wage. In other words, it would take 20 years to earn 1 talent. So I'm not going to give you the actual amount. Regardless of what amount we may come up with that is equivalent in today's economy, what is clear here is that God has entrusted us with an enormous gift to our care. Even the one with the least ability is given with a significant responsibility. The parable leaves no room for comparison. I got 1, you got 2, you got 10. No. Each one is given significant, enormous amount and responsibility. Third, there will be a time of account settlement. There will come a time when the master asks us what we did with the talent he has given to us. There will be a consequence about what we do with it. So the true servants were called good and faithful servant, whereas the servant with 1 talent was called wicked and lazy servant. Let's pause here. What sets apart good and faithful servants from wicked and lazy servant? Good and faithful servants put their talents to use, while the wicked and lazy servant buried it. So what motivated the one with 1 talent to bury it? It was fear. Let's look at verse 25. Matthew 25, verse 25. I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent in the ground. This servant was afraid. His fear was based on his twisted understanding of who the master was. Notice in verse 24, just one verse above, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow, and gathering where you scattered no seed. His understanding of the master was God is mean. God is unconcerned with our fate. Being faithful is contingent upon an accurate view of God. If our view is mugged, cluttered, or fuzzy, then we would have trouble. The servant who buried his talent out of fear was not faithful to his master. He did not have an accurate view of his master. As a result, he was called wicked and lazy servant. Now, according to rabbinic law, at that time, burying property was practiced as the safest way to be free from any liability. What does that mean? By burying his master's property, he has preserved his master's capital. So the wicked servant played safe, thinking only for his own security, not serving his master. The wicked servant had the fear of failure and losing the talent he had been given, thinking of his own security, not serving his master. So, fear. Fear is everybody's problem. Fear often paralyzes us so that we're not able to do what God has entrusted us to do. What is your fear as you listen, as you sit down and go through this parable? What is your fear that makes you ineffective or impotent in doing God's work for His kingdom? Fear of public speaking, asserting yourself, making decisions, intimacy, changing jobs, being alone, aging, driving, losing a loved one, ending a relationship, or relocation. I know by social scientists that with the social media or SNS, you may be connected this generation, but you are alone. Then maybe you. As I was going through this topic of fear, my wife actually introduced me with this book called, this is the title, Feel the Fear, ... and Do It Anyway. That's the title of the book by Susan Jeffers. And actually that book by Susan Jeffers, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway, was a New York Times bestseller. So I know it's not just me who is afraid, or it's not just you, some of you, or most of you, or all of you, who has some battle with your own fear. I know people out there, they're dealing with it. Susan Jeffers, she talked about 3 levels of fear. I'm just going to go through kind of slowly because I don't have a slide, but just listen, bear with me. 3 levels of fear according to Jeffers. Level 1, fear. Surface story. Those that happen and those that requiring action. So the level 1 fear, surface fear, is those that happen, such as aging, becoming disabled, retirement, being alone, natural disasters, loss of financial security, not having financial security, change, dying, illness. On the same level, level one, those requiring action includes going back to school in September, some of you, making decisions, changing a career, making friends, ending or beginning relationships, asserting oneself, losing weight, being interviewed, driving, public speaking, and so on. That's level one. Level two, fears are the fears that are situation-oriented, meaning they involve the ego. So level two fear includes rejection, success. Yes, people are afraid of success. Failure, being vulnerable, being conned, helplessness, disapproval, loss of image. That's level two fear that involves the ego. Level three fears, which Jeffers say the most critical, the biggest fear of all. Level three gets down to the nitty-gritty of the issue, the one that really keeps you stuck. At the bottom of every one of your fears is simply, according to Jeffers, the fear that you can't handle whatever life may bring you. Is that you? Do you have fear that you can't handle? I can't handle it. So level one fear goes like something like this. I can't handle illness. I can't handle making a mistake. I can't handle losing my job. I can't handle getting old. I can't handle being alone. I can't handle making a fool of myself or out of myself. I can't handle not getting the job. I can't handle losing him or her. I can't handle losing my money. That's level one. Level two, that involves ego. I can't handle the responsibilities of success. Yes, some people are really actually afraid of success because the responsibilities they foresee would be too much to handle. Goes on the level two, I can't handle failure. I can't handle being rejected. Now, Jeffers goes on, the truth is, according to her, okay, get this, if you knew you could handle anything that came your way, what would you possibly have to fear? Did you get that? Let me read it again. If you knew you could handle anything that came your way, what did you possibly have to fear? And she said, nothing. Wait a minute. All you have to do to diminish your fears is to develop more trust in your ability to handle whatever comes your way. Wait a minute again. That's what Jeffers said. Wait a minute, trust in my ability to handle whatever comes in my way? You know, in this Christian circle, which I'm part of, trusting God with exclamation mark. Trusting God, yeah, great. We're so comfortable with the Christian jargon or language, and of course, sincere. Trust in the Lord is great thing. But we're not comfortable with trusting me. Think about it. Are you comfortable? Do you trust yourself? We get awkward when we talk about trusting ourselves. Hence, sometimes false sense of humility kicks in. Oftentimes, low self-esteem kicks in. Even though we claim we know who we are children of God indeed. In fact, my favorite passage that I'm not going to elaborate today is we are indeed God's masterpiece. Though we know we are God's handiwork, and we are children of God, trusting God is great, yes. But what about me? I'm so insecure. I don't know who I am. But it says, trust in my ability to handle whatever comes in my way? Think about this. If we truly believe in God, who has given us talents so that we can use them for His kingdom, shouldn't He also give us ability and resources to accomplish what He has intended in us? In this sense, trusting God means trusting me. Since trusting me is based on my faith in God, all of me depends, cries out. Every single cell in DNA cries out for its maker, the Creator. Apart from God, I cannot trust me. But I believe I have what it takes to accomplish what God has entrusted in me. Not just me, God's people, that's you. Do you have what it takes to do what God has entrusted in you? And use it for His kingdom? Let me quote this, my favorite quote. After giving this quotation, I'm going to tell you who actually said this. Some of you may know this, may have heard, because he's a really famous guy. You can't connect dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. So you have to trust that dots will somehow connect in your future. Does it sound familiar? Not yet? It's okay. I keep going. You have to trust in something. Your gut, destiny, life, karma, wherever. Because believing that dots will connect down the road will give you the confidence to follow your heart, even when it leads you off the well-known path. And that will make all the difference. Now, if you're really following closely, you have to kind of, this like red light flashing. In the quote it says karma and gut and, well, this is what Steve Jobs said. Steve Jobs is only half right, that we have to trust in something. We have to trust that dots will somehow connect in our future, although we don't see, but we know who holds the future. But he's only half right because we do not trust gut. We do not trust destiny. We do not trust life. Certainly, we do not trust karma. We trust God the Almighty, maker of heaven and earth. We trust the triune God, God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit, who is enabling us to do what He has called us to do. Now the big question is, how do we move from I can't handle it to I will handle it? Let me suggest two things. Moving from I can't handle it to I will handle it, whatever life throws at me. First, knowing who the master is. You already know who your master is, who your God is. But I'm asking you that question once again. Who is God to you? Don't try to be theological, spiritual. Try to be real, brutally real. Who is God to you? Who are you to God? What we are trying to do in Philippi is we're trying to implement the quiet time, and there's like the format that we are using, and we did that during last leaders retreat. So after reading the passage, we asked a question. Specs, but those of you who are not familiar, it's okay. And the question at the very end, share part, what have you learned about God? Wow. That's great. What have I learned about God? You learned a lot about God already. You know who your God is already. You have more than enough knowledge to know, to confess, this is my God. And the second question is, what have you learned about humans, people? That's an awesome question. You know who you are. You know who you are to God. So I don't have to repeat. I'm not going to repeat. But those are good questions. Who is God to you? Who are you to God? Let me quote Philippians 4:13. Again, from my favorite version, Message Bible, Philippians 4:13, quote, whatever I have, wherever I am, I can make it through anything in the one with the capital O, who makes me who I am. Let me repeat. Philippians 4:13 from the Message. Whatever I have, wherever I am, I can make it through anything in the one who makes me who I am. What are you going to obey? That's the third question. Knowing who the Master is, who the giver, the source of your gifts and talent. That's first one. To move from I can't handle it to I will handle it. Second, walking right through fears with God. Going back to what Jeff was saying, the only way to get rid of the fear of doing something is to go out and do it. Hence the title, Feel the Fear, Do It Anyway. Pushing through fear is less frightening. Did you get that? Pushing through fears is less frightening than living with the underlying fear that comes from a feeling of helplessness. So instead of sitting down and going through fear, why don't we just go out and do it? Push through. You know, in my personal reflection time, which I often do, it's my life practice that I set aside time to go to somewhere. Last year, when I was really going through some sort of soul searching, I went to Kentucky. It's called, Abbey of Gethsemane, where Henry Nouwen, my favorite author, spent some time there. And as I was going through reflection, serious reflection time and soul searching, I was actually going through my diary. And I found, as I go through my diary, my to-do list that I wrote 10 years ago had 3 things that I would do. After 10 years, they were not done. Wow, that was scary. It was really scary. After 10 years, they were still the same. It was a shocking discovery. So living with the helplessness is more unbearable than going out there and pushing through fear and doing what I said I needed to do. How about you? Do you reflect? Do you set aside time to kind of ponder upon? Do you have to-do list that you made 10 years ago? Have you ever gone back and checked? Is that scary? One of my favorite songs, again, is Carolyn Aaron's Seize the Day. Some of you may know. Anybody know that song, Carolyn? It's kind of old song. If you don't, it's okay. I'm going to share the lyrics. The lyric goes like this. Well, I know a man who's been doing some thinking. He's as bitter and cold as the whiskey he's drinking. He's talking about fear, about chances not taken. If you listen to him, you can hear his heart breaking. He says, one day you're a boy, and the next day you're dead. I wish way back when someone had said, seize the day, seize whatever you can, because life slips away just like hourglass sand. 10 years from now, I don't want to have the same to-do list that I have now, which I should have done 10 years ago. I don't have time. How about you? You know, I was going through leadership literature as I was involved with my mission agencies before, and I bumped into this book called Leading Me by Steve Brown. He talked about unhooking a bungee cord of fear. Again, unhooking a bungee cord of fear. We need to unhook a bungee cord that holds us back and makes us ineffective to use our God-given talents. Fears can be rooted in disbelief or distortion of God's character, our own lack of skills, limited experience, misinformation, spiritual attack, or lack of perspective or past trauma. Whatever your fear may be, let's unhook it by the grace of God. If anything is holding on to you right now, let's unhook it. Cut it out by the grace of God. Christ has set us free. Facing fears from behind and in front. Let's picture Exodus. These Israelites are running, chased by the Egyptian army, Pharaoh's army. And they're facing Pharaoh's army from behind, and they're facing sea in front of them. They knew who their God was. Facing fears from behind and in front, Israelites walked right through the split sea. They still had fears, I'm sure. It's not that fear's gone completely. They had fears of Pharaoh's army chasing them and the Red Sea in front of them. Their fears probably did not disappear as they walked into the sea, seeing the walls of the sea on both sides, and Pharaoh's army still chasing them from behind. But they walked right through their fears, for they knew who split the sea and who dried the bottom of the sea, so they could walk right through it. Are you afraid of using what God has given you? Let's walk right through it. Because He that is in you is far greater than the fears you face out there. We cannot operate our lives based on fear. It is not about your security or insecurity, but it is about serving God and others. The day will come soon that our God settles the account. Are we getting ready for that day? Let us all hear our Master's cheers. Well done, good and faithful servants. You're faithful with a few, and I'll put you in charge of many things, all for the glory of God and His kingdom. As we close, I'd like to take some time to pray. Can we have worship team come up, please? Let's just take a minute or two to really go through. Are you going through some kind of fear? Can you identify with what I just shared with you? Is anything holding onto you? Bungee cord that's in your way? Let's unhook it, only by the grace of God. Let's just cry out to God. The day will come, I know, God. You have given me this. You have given me the leadership, gift to sing, praise, but I've never put to use. I never used that leadership for your glory. I never used my voice. I never used my heart. I never used my hands and feet, my lips, my eyes and my ears and whatever for you, because I was so afraid of my own insecurity or my own security. God, I let that fear go. would you help me? Would you help me to walk right through fears? Because it is you who has given me that gift. And it is you who's enabling me to accomplish what you have intended in our lives. So, dear sisters and brothers, just take a few minutes just to fix our eyes and hearts on the giver of our faith, examining our heart to see if there's any fear. Get this, to the best of my knowledge, Steve Jobs may have been a great man, but he does not know the God as you and I know him, our God, the Creator, the Triune God who made us, who loves us so much, and who actually gave his own life. For a person who doesn't know God as we do, can say you have to trust in something, your God, your destiny, your karma. How much more should we trust in God? Doesn't it break your heart? Let's trust God. Father God, I see your great women of God, your daughters and sons in front of me. I see this great army, your army, God. And yet, maybe some of us, we're just caught up with fear, living our lives under fear. The assumption that if we do something, I may fail, or I may succeed, whatever. But would you strengthen us? Would you speak to us in a very personal way as we pray right now? It is our desire, God, to serve you, not just caught up with our own security, but to serve you, to serve others. It is our desire to hear from our Master, well done, good and faithful servant. You have done your part. You are faithful with a little, now I'm going to make you in charge of many. It is our desire, God, to put to use what you have given us. Help us to push through our fears, because you are way, way greater than anything that the world out there can throw at us. Yes, I will handle it because you are enabling us. In Jesus' name, amen.